This is Future-Based Podcast. For more information, visit futurebased.org.
We would like to see our projects challenge the common sense somehow.
And also a little reminder, I guess, to not take things too serious.
This is the Future-Based Podcast from the series Beyond Human Relations with your host Annika van den Våglund. In this third podcast of the series, I'm going into conversation with Nonhuman Nonsense. Nonhuman Nonsense is a research-driven design and art studio. They seek to transmute our relation to the non-human by embracing the contradictory and the paradoxical. Founded by Fidjeland and Linnea Våglund, it is based between Berlin and Stockholm. I'm talking to them today because of the high relevance of their intriguing projects and ideas that build on important questions of ontology in the Anthropocene today. Welcome and thank you for being on our podcast today, Leo and Linnea. How are you doing at the moment?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're doing very well, I think. Or?
Yeah, we're doing good. We're in Berlin and it's a bit of a quarantine here, but we are still in our studio quite a lot. So we're quite happy and calm.
You can still work on your projects at the moment.
We can still work on them. Some of the exhibitions have been cancelled a little bit, but I guess everyone's living through that more or less. But we're very lucky, I think. We can still go to the studio and spend our time there. So it's good.
Good. That's good to hear. What drove you to become the Nonhuman Nonsense Collective together? Could you maybe, what the name stands for and how you became what you are?
So me, Linnea, came more from like a design and art background, and Leo came from a physics background. And then we met, and then we started to work together, and then we found this field between science and art and speculation, and why we're called Nonhuman Nonsense. Maybe you can say it.
Yeah. So we're called Nonhuman Nonsense because we are interested in our relationship to the non-human, specifically maybe animals, objects, ecology, technology, or anything that's between or beyond those categories as well. We are interested, I guess, in the non-human because we had this feeling that many of the problems that we are living through in this difficult time, I guess, is that comes from this relationship to the non-human, or comes from how we relate to non-human. And the nonsense comes, several things. I think it's because we're interested in using paradoxes or contradictions in our projects or in our storytelling to try to maybe not really tell people what to think, but to open up a discussion or open up a field somehow. And also maybe it comes from, we would like to see our projects challenge the common sense somehow, or that we are interested in dealing with the questions that are normally just seen as common sense.
And also a little reminder, I guess, to not take things too serious. That's often important for us to have fun and to work a lot with humor, because for us it opens up a way of being curious of our surrounding and maybe not too judgmental too quick, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm curious why you chose the term non-human. In my thesis, I thought a lot about how we could term like what is non-human. I read in Kirksey and Helmreich, two anthropologists, they talk about when we say the word non-human, we actually imply that there is a lack of something. Why did you choose the term?
Yeah, I guess it's special because the name is sort of paradoxical itself, right? Because maybe ultimately it's a little bit difficult to separate out the non-human from the human at all, or maybe this is something that we've come to a little bit recently, I guess, right? That it's kind of nonsense to say that there some things are human and some things are not human.
In the beginning, when we got the name, we were also having fun with like taking parts away from the name. So we were like non-nonsense, non-human sense, human sense, non-human.
Yeah, it's actually very cool how all the parts differently work together. You found the combination of science and art, and it gets you to speculate. What other things does art bring to you in the discussion of the non-human, also for other people?
I think that for us, it's a practice where we can explore our own interests and our own feelings, and then express them through art, or express them through a medium that is, where we can be open, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I think it's also this working with the non-human through art for me is a lot about accepting that there's so much we don't know about and that we can't access. By being curious on that, I think it makes us, for me, more curious and more kind to non-humans, and more like, I feel a bit less lonely also.
I think that art is also, or how we use it maybe, is to try to enable access to the underlying layers of ethics or politics or metaphysics somehow, so that we try to make these stories that can allow us to speak to that which lies behind somehow, to maybe break through polarization or open up something somehow. Yeah, I guess that's how we came to the practice. I don't know really how we came to the non-human. I feel like it was sort of
oh yeah, when I was in, I've always loved non-humans.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It feels like you love animals.
Yeah, I always said like if I wouldn't work with this, I would like to work somehow with animals. But you, I don't know. Do you like non-humans?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't know. I think for me, I maybe came to it from the Anthropocene somehow, I think, or from trying to see maybe how I could help.
But you love physics also.
Yeah.
You came from physics. You're very interested in that as well. No?
You mean before?
How things are.
I mean, yeah, maybe with the physics, what I realized there was that I started studying physics because I was interested in the implications that it had on life, or on the metaphysical side of it, I guess. So now I'm really happy that it feels like we can really engage with the implications of not only technology, but also like the philosophy, and really engage in the metaphysical somehow. That feels great, I think. And that is, I guess, when you go to the end of it, that's maybe how you relate to the non-human, right? It's like, who am I? What is everything else? How do I relate to objects, or what is subject and object, and all of these like very classical questions.
Linnea, you said it's also a thing in feeling less lonely. So maybe we already all feel the connection to these other things, but you activate other people to get their awareness there. I think that's really beautiful. You also talked about learning to design for debate and not the problem solving. Could you say that maybe that is a goal you would like to accomplish with the collective? Right? Raising awareness or creating new debates?
Yeah, the reason that we do it is to make people maybe stop and think about the narratives that we live under somehow, and see what world they're creating.
Or who they are because of the world they are.
So trying to maybe create an opportunity where we can examine our views. So we're working with the mind, or we're working with creating a story that people can explore, and where they can see themselves and reflect themselves in it somehow, I guess.
And I wanted to talk about the Pink Chicken Project. On the website, you say it's coloring all chickens pink with a gene drive. And I think for me and many others, the first time you will see this, it will be very shocking. Can you maybe tell, how did you come up with the project and what was the goal of it?
So the Pink Chicken Project then suggests to color all chickens pink by using a gene drive, which is this new biotechnology that greatly accelerates the spread of a genetic modification, so that you can basically change an entire organism in the wild, or in this case change all chickens in the world to the color pink. For us, maybe the process started with the Anthropocene, or hearing about that there were some scientists that were trying to figure out what the traces of environmental destruction would be, like how would this be visible in the rock strata or in the mountain or to the future.
Yeah, the Anthropocene working group.
Yeah, exactly. Right? They suggested that chicken bones is one of the primary stratigraphic identifiers, because they are geographically widespread. So it's the same chicken basically that's covering the entire planet. It's stratigraphically restricted, which means that in the strata it doesn't look like anything that existed previously, or the morphology of the bones, or how the bones look basically when they're fossilized. They look very different because of how heavily they've been bred, or how heavily they've been modified. So that's also something that's really interesting. The reason that chickens are such a good marker is because they have so many diseases, that they get fractures or bone twists and joint problems. They grow so quickly that their body sort of collapses under its own weight. So the goal of the project is so it's framed as a sort of activist campaign to try to modify all the chickens in the world pink.
Especially their bones.
Yeah, to spread a manifesto that we've written in the project that links social and ecological justice. So it's intended to create a discussion on like, who has the impact over the traces that humanity is leaving behind, or begin to understand somehow the scale of it. You know, there's this unfathomable scale that there's 60 billion chickens being killed every year, and
it's the most common bird on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. The Pink Chicken Project suggests genetically modifying a chicken with pink bones and feathers. Spreading this new gene with an engineered gene drive, the entire species, Gallus domesticus, could be permanently altered in just a few years. As chicken bones are one of the main markers of the Anthropocene, this intervention would modify the future fossil record, coloring the geological trace of humankind pink. I mean, in one way, anything that we do modifies our surroundings, so anything that you do will sort of end up in the rocks somehow, but that's something that we want to highlight. And then in the manifesto we talk about it's meant as an opposition to the power structures that enable and aggravate the violence that's forced upon the non-human world. So the reason that it's pink is, of course, because pink is a very culturally coded color, or for us at least, as the opposition to patriarchy or heterosexism and ableism and many of these other
so it's like a female or queer color.
Yeah, so it's linking these power dynamics with the destruction of the ecological world somehow.
So the project is also in a way a provocation also, and very paradoxical in itself. So
were there certain artists or scientists that inspired you? You mentioned the traces of the Anthropocene were very important for you in this.
Yeah, so we work like in this project. We talk to the Anthropocene working group, and especially one geologist called Keris Bennett, who has done a paper on the chickens as a marker in the Anthropocene. And except for that, we work together with the Syn Biolab at the at Imperial College in London. We also reached out to a lot of people to like get input on the project. So we made a scenario, and then we took it out to discuss with a lot of different thinkers that had inspired us. And then we made the objects we realized somehow what the project was about. We just had this scenario. We were like, I think this is about power structure. I think it's about scale, but we didn't really understand the depth. So we were talking to people that we were thinking that could influence us. So we're talking to Heather Davis, for example.
Yeah, I think that in the process also, I think the project came out a lot of the Heather Davis, and she wrote a book called The Art in the Anthropocene, where the introduction of the book is just really great. So I think that's how, in the process, how it sort of came together for us. We were exploring the Anthropocene, and we were reading this book by Heather Davis, or this introduction, and then this idea came up of reoccupying the stratum. And then since we were trying to work with these scientists at the same time, or synthetic biologists, and then it sort of came together, and we were like, oh, what if we would change the color of the stratum? And then it's like, oh, and we heard this news about the chicken bones, and then we were like, oh, what color would we change it to? And then we had like, I remember we had like 1 second of thinking, and then we both were like, oh, pink at the same time. And then
and we look at each other and like, whoa. And then we were like, no, this will never work, because there is no technology that can change all the chickens in the world, but let's keep it. And then we had like three different concepts that we went to the synthetic biology lab with. We were like, oh, we have this one that's probably quite plausible, and then we have this one, and then we have this really crazy one about coloring all chickens pink, and I don't think that's possible. And then he also did actually the same. He was like,
they're gonna use like he was like, wow, this could be possible with gene drive. And then he went to his friend and like, oh, they're gonna use gene drive to make all chickens pink. And then they're like, what?
But they were like, this is so provocative.
And about that controversy, if you would get the option to make this project real, if it would not be speculative, would you do it in order to raise the awareness for future generations? Or
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. No, of course I don't want this to happen. This is kind of interesting for me to be a bit ambiguous also myself on how I feel, because I'm not sure how I don't want it to happen. Really.
Yeah. So I guess in the one hand, we're thinking about the impact of the project could be that if we would genetically modify one chicken and have it equip it with a gene drive, but keep it in some sort of high security cage or something, you know, that would be a much something would create maybe a bigger discussion or a bigger debate somehow in the world, because it's just wrong, I guess, you know, it's really shocking. And you could say that would be something that starts a debate about these issues. But I think that for us also, when we're doing this speculative practice we don't want to also reinforce the world that we're criticizing somehow, but we are interested in working together with science like we've done to make it relevant and to make it realistic. But there is a balance, you know, there. And
but I think that's also interesting when it's a way of discussing things before they are upon us. Like often it's too early or too late to like discuss different scenarios, I guess. So with this project, you could actually see a scenario and think about it, like what's good and what's bad and what do we want and why, like how does this compare to the violence that we're already doing on chickens or other.
You also describe on the website about encoding a message in their DNA. Could you maybe expand the encoded message in the chicken bones?
Yeah, so the manifesto is also encoded. You can store information in DNA just as you can store information in a computer somehow, that you can take any information and then encode it into the base pairs of DNA, the A, T, G, and C. Just like in a computer, everything's stored in zeros and ones. DNA is suggested to be one of the, like a very good storage of information for very long times, because it's a very, very stable molecule. So if we would write this manifesto and encode it into the DNA of the chicken, the molecule itself, it's so stable that in the future, if they could see it, like sequence it and read the message back. Half-life of DNA is like 500 years or something, which means that it's visible for thousands of years, basically. A time capsule somehow, that we're using the chickens as a vessel to send this message to the future, but it's also a message to the present, of course.
You went to the UN conference on biological diversity with your pink chicken. We will post a video where you talk about it at the UN conference. How did people there respond to it? Did it bring about some change you expected, or did people get into conversation with you?
Yeah, the UN was really fascinating experience, I think, for us. It was really, we went actually twice to the UN. First, once in Montreal and then once Egypt.
Yeah, so on this conference, one of the big topics was this technology, gene drives. So it's a conference on biodiversity, and now specifically they discussed a lot about gene drives. Yeah. So when
conference sounds like they're just talking about it because they're interested, I think. But they're also, I mean, there's 196 countries that are trying to agree on if it should be legal on planet Earth. I think that's like a very ambitious, I think it's kind of a utopian forum also, that, like, I mean, on paper it's really all of the countries coming together and discussing the ethics around it, you know, and trying to balance things out. And I think that going there, we also encountered the reality of it also, that it's really a lot about power, that it's really a forum where it's a lot about
a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of money and politics, and very sort of difficult to actually talk about the ethics somehow.
Mm-hmm. So when we got there with the pink chicken, they were already like discussing gene drives, and it's a controversial topic. So then it started to spread, like, that's a pink gene drive chicken. Yeah. That's a pink gene, like, so people were very first maybe shocked, and then curious, and then everyone wanted to talk to us. Some people wanted to know about the technology, what is it about, because they had to take a decision, what they were thinking about it. Some people just wanted to talk to them maybe, and some people wanted to discuss ethics around it. And it was kind of interesting that everyone wanted to talk to us, because it was a place where it was a very polarized debate. So,
and I think that the reason that they take so polarized position is also that they try to move the countries in that direction also. So if they're trying to restrict use of gene drives, for example, they take the most extreme position of like complete ban on gene drives, you know, so that they can widen the discussion field, so that the countries don't have to take the most extreme position, but that it's more comfortable for them to move towards being more restrictive, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also they're discussing like this is the best possible use case maybe that you could use gene drive with, and if maybe people will also use it in less like good ways, or
Yeah, that's maybe one of the things about discussing or legalizing around the technology also, because what the scientists are saying at the UN then is that we can't have a complete ban on the technology, because it's not the technology itself that's the problem. They want to be able to do research and they want to learn more, and so they want to have like a case by case assessment. We have to look at areas of the technology and then see how, if it's a good case or if it's a bad case, and then there's just so many uncertainties involved somehow, I guess. So
I guess what we are interested in is how this changed the power structures also, on what way we think that we have the power to change and think that we can decide what would happen, but actually it doesn't work really like that.
Yeah, we just talked about that the Pink Chicken Project actually doesn't give any solutions or answers, and that you try to seek the complexity within every project you make. And you have a really, really interesting list of projects and a very pleasing website, I think. Just to mention a few, Becoming Stone, and one I really liked, the anti-anthropocentric vending machine, selling cures for anthropocentrism. Could you just in a few sentences tell about that, what it is?
Yeah, so this is actually the new project we have, Planetary Personhood. It started with us being interested in stones and how the world of a stone was. So this was just a process project within that, I guess. So what we did in that one was that we were in stone circles, and we were interested in the mythology in the stone circles, that it could be humans that had turned into stone. And then we were also interested in eating stone and how what you become what you eat, I guess. So in the vending machine, there is like a little, like a spell that you will turn into stone when you eat this stone, and how this, by turning to stone, you will get cured of the anthropocentrism, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it has an edible stone also in every
it.
little capsule that you get.
It has an edible stone.
Yeah.
How did you make it? Does it taste nice?
Yeah, you love it.
I love stone. It's like clay. It's like, so there is in several cultures that you eat different kind of clays, and they taste different from different parts of the world. So it was funny because we
found one that was really, really hard. So it is sort of like a stone, but when you eat it, you don't break your teeth, but it sort of becomes this mushy clay thing.
You just said that the eating the stones was already on the pathway for the next project you are now working on, and that's about Martian rights, planetary personhood, seeing Mars as a terra nullius, as a blank canvas again. And you talk about the Universal Declaration of Martian Rights, which reminds me actually of the last podcast I did with Jamie Woodhouse. It talks about the Human Declaration of Sentient Rights for all sentient beings. I think it's funny how these two things come together now in these podcasts, with both actually as a goal to have more compassion for more than a human. My question would now be, there are already so many problems on Earth. Why are you doing a project about Mars?
So we were interested in Mars more as a thought, I guess, or Mars as an opportunity to imagine something completely different from what's going on Earth, and as a way to maybe free ourselves from the baggage or the norms, or how you usually believe what's possible on Earth, and try to see if we could take it to an extreme somehow, right?
Yeah, maybe you should tell what.
Yeah. So Planetary Personhood is the Universal Declaration of Martian Right, and it's based around the establishment of the entire planet Mars as a legal entity. And this is very inspired by something that's been happening in around the world lately, that's called the Rights of Nature movement, where legal entities have been given independent personhood or legal personhood, for example. It started in recent times with a national park in New Zealand called Te Urewera in 2014, where basically the idea is that you move the ownership of a non-human entity from, for example, the government to the national park itself, or to the volcano itself, or to the river itself. And then that creates an entity that partly can represent itself in the law system or in the court system, so that you don't have to, it's called legal standing, so that when, for example, someone spills a poisonous chemical or like destroys the ecosystem, something like that, that you don't have to have a human right to be violated before it can appear in court, but that the entity itself can appear and be represented by itself. So that's a very legal construction, I guess, in a way to protect non-human entities and ecosystems, which comes out of a need for stronger environmental laws, I guess. But on the other hand, we were also interested in how this legal construction came about. Or in New Zealand, for example, it comes out of very much of a Maori cosmology or a Maori worldview, where the volcano is maybe a being, or we're not experts on how it's a being, but the laws are also very progressive, and they talk about Maori concepts of how to relate.
So Maori is the indigenous people.
Of how to relate to non-humans, and just it's very telling of a completely different relationship to the natural world and to the non-human world. So that's why what we were really interested in seeing, like, but how, if we applied this thinking on Mars, what would that mean on Mars? And so the project also talks about Martians.
Yeah, but it's also a reaction on how the narrative is about going to Mars, that it's about this narrative of going there, colonizing Mars, terraforming it, making it like Earth. It's a very extractivist narrative that Mars is an empty place. We can go there and it can be our planet B, and we can go there and change it so it's a better place. And then we were interested in thinking about what's like how humans, like how that narrative is maybe destructive, and how we can respect other ways of being and not like seeing it in that way, I guess.
Yeah. And also we were interested in Mars because it sort of highlights these questions around life, or the boundary between life and non-life, that usually we value biodiversity or other species very high. If you imagine Mars, where maybe there's traditional life in the traditional sense. Also, maybe there are different bacteria and things no one really knows yet, but you could also imagine that there was a place that doesn't have any bacteria, for example. And then the question comes, but does that mean that humans can do whatever they want there? But to us, there was something that felt kind of wrong with turning Mars into a huge mine, where you could extract all of the minerals and the resources that was there. So I think that's where we started the investigation somehow, from that feeling that even though there's even if there's no Martian bacteria there, surely we must be able to relate to our world in a way that's not about extracting as much profit that we can.
Yeah, and for me personally, I also realized that my view on Mars was that there was like a empty place and a quiet place where nothing was happening and was just still, nothing going on. And then when I learned about how they're all like a geodiversity, it's like richer geodiversity. And it also started with why we were interested in stones was because we were interested in anthropocentrism and how to like extend compassion beyond ourselves. And then it's maybe more easy to do to animals and plants. But then we were thinking like, what maybe it's super hard to do to something that's seen as dead, or like matter as stones, for example.
So kind of central in this would be the boundary between life and non-life. And you put the question on your own Instagram, does non-life existence have a value in itself? Yeah, what I think is interesting in this, you call it planetary personhood. And personhood is, for us in the West, mainly a human trait and a human thing. Why does a non-living thing need this human trait to even have rights? Is it just for the legal system, or could we also have other ways of giving them these rights?
Yeah, I guess that's what's paradoxical about the project, that it starts with trying to create this very legal construction of how, like we urging that we should establish Mars as a legal person and should have rights somehow. And then in the story, we sort of talk about Martians also, because for us, we considered, if Mars was a person, then how would you meet it? Like, if you were there, where would you encounter it? And it would be through meeting the rocks or through meeting the Martians somehow. So the project says that urges to also recognize all the Martians, on all the different levels as persons, And then it follows one specific Martian that came to Earth, which is a Martian meteorite called Alan Hills 84001, who left Mars about 17 million years ago or something like that, right? And then he was knocked off the planet by another meteor hitting the Martian surface, and then he roamed the solar system for millions of years, and then finally landed on Antarctica about 13,000 years ago, where he was lying around until 1984, where a NASA mission to Antarctica picked him up to be studied, because they pick up meteorites on Antarctica quite regularly. After studying him after a few years, they declared that he contained evidence of life on Mars. And there was this big thing in 1996 where Bill Clinton, the US president, made a big statement that maybe we've discovered trace of life on Mars. And I think for us, Alan was really interesting, because he talks about how we sort of put so much value on these super tiny microscopic bacteria somehow, that there's this very big thing on that life is seen as something completely different from non-life.
So it's a way also to show how bizarre the categorizations are with
exactly. So just like the pink chicken is about using genetic modification to discuss the implications of synthetic biology, then Planetary Personhood is about maybe using citizenship and categorization and constitutions to create a discussion on how our need just to classify things into living and non-living, and who has rights and who doesn't have rights. And
could you say that you use Jane Bennett's strategic anthropomorphism to give them human traits?
Yeah, we're using it to, I think it's a bit double, like what you said before, that it's also like, do we need to put a face on something to be able to respect them? In a way, I think it's very, why can't we just respect that stones are also very important, or like both
without making them human.
Yeah, exactly. Like both seeing that they are part of us, like we need them to even exist, but also seeing them as something that have rights to exist in their own sense without even being important for us, I guess. We felt very stuck between these two things, anthropocentrism and anthropomorphism. And then I think we read, maybe it was in Timothy Morton who was writing that, but actually everything is morphizing the other.
Exactly. So even though we can't escape being human, or we can't escape our way of accessing the world, or our way of projecting how to exist onto other beings, that doesn't mean that we have to think of our way of being as the most important one or the best one, or that we exist fundamentally more than everything else just because we can't imagine some other way of being.
What would you like for the project to achieve? Is it maybe less speculative than the Pink Chicken project? Would you actually want to have guardians for Mars, as you put on the website?
Yeah, I think on one hand, we are really trying to make the United Nations adopt an international treaty to establish Mars as a legal person, have its rights protected in a Martian constitution.
And I also think that Earth can be a legal person.
Yeah.
That would be super cool. In a way, to put a legal personhood on non-human entities is a way maybe to push our knowledge system in that direction.
Yeah. So I guess we see the project as a part of a transformation of how we relate to the non-human, or how we relate to Mars. That's maybe one of the ideas about dark ecology also, right? That natural only means normative, but the norm is so strong that we think that it's ingrained into the things themselves somehow, or that we think that the norm is so strong that it must be part of the natural world, or that it's something out there, that it's unchangeable and that we have to preserve. What we're also interested in is to try to have to be compassionate without seeing something as unchangeable or natural, or that's maybe what Morten is saying also about nature, that it's much more close, that it's really about when you go out on the street, you encounter ecology and you encounter the non-human all the time, and about seeing how you're not separate from this also, that this is, that's you're the trees that you're seeing, the ecosystem that you're part of, that it's about us. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I guess that we are part of a system. I guess that's what maybe the virus Rona is teaching us as well. It's really like within us and outside of us, and very global and very much here and now, but also very much everywhere at the same time.
If Mars would get legal rights, how would this go into practice? What would you wish for?
I don't know. That's what we're asking with the project. I think we're still exploring this also, because who is a suitable guardian for Mars? Like on Earth, you can see that there are indigenous communities who've been living for 10 or 20,000 years in a specific area, and they have knowledges about how to be part of that ecosystem without destroying it somehow. This is what we're interested in on Mars also, that if then Mars would be represented by a group of guardians, for example, who would be the voice of Mars, or how would that be? How can we talk to Mars? I don't think there's an easy answer to the question either.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre to even ask humans to talk for a non-human.
Yeah, I hope that by asking people who have experience in how to listen to the land, or how to listen to the world, that they would be able to teach us something about how to listen to a world, even if it's not containing our idea of life or our idea of beings, for example.
What interests me is you use technology to combine it with non-human things. Is there for you a clear border in how far technology may interfere with nature? You already said that you wouldn't really implement the Pink Chicken Project if it were a possibility, but should there be, maybe just as the Universal Declaration of Martian Rights, should there be legal grounds on how much we may interfere with nature?
I think it's very interesting to start to see, or to stop to see things as property, that we can own other beings or other things around us. That would be very interesting.
Why?
I guess it's about how that it makes you relate to the things around you in a certain way, that you stop and ask, what do they want? I think that would be very interesting.
If we're trying to both dissolve the concept of technology and the concept of nature, that it's a kind of a difficult question to answer, because what is technology and how is it interfering in nature? And if there's only transformation, then it's like that dichotomy maybe is not so inspiring for us, I guess, because it's more about seeing like what sort of feelings or worlds or presences and absences are created by the things that we do. Maybe focus more on why would we use this specific technology or this specific legal system or this specific way of building society, or seeing maybe that if that motivation is something that just wanting other beings to be happy and to be good, then I think that it will be more constructive than that doesn't have so much maybe about technology or about nature to do.
It makes us happy also.
Yeah, that's exactly, that's the core somehow. So I think that for us, we're at the same time trying to create projects that can have an impact or to maybe make other people think, but it's also really about us personally.
I think something that's followed me throughout all these years on working within industrial design and like product design and stuff like that is the questions of measurability. It's always like, how do you measure your success? How do you measure? And I think that's maybe something that we want to also to not do, I guess.
You have to think about creating new kin that Haraway talks about very much. You really opened up new ways of thinking for me, and with the Pink Chicken Project I already talked to so many people about it, and I hope inspired our listeners as well. I wish you all the best of luck with new things, and also this reflecting period. I think it's very important in this time that we also all take a step back. Thank you so much for having or for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
It was really nice.
Thank you both.
For more information, links and show notes, please visit futurebased.org.